Hello everyone, my name is Harmon Kong and I have a special guest here named K-Rahn Vallatine, who's the author of Beyond the Crack Generation and the founder of Live Above the Hype. And I wanted to share his story with you all. It's a book I've read and I admire, and to tell you a little bit about K-Rahn, I met him about 6 years ago, maybe a little more than that, when you were just getting started with this.
Yeah.
And what I love about the work you're doing is that we share a common interest, and that is we do care about the youth.
Yes.
And particularly you care about youth at risk.
Yeah.
And you become a strong advocate for the youth.
Yeah.
And the work you do and the life you've lived is an incredible story, and I want you to share that with us today. So thank you for being here, K-Rahn.
Thank you for having me.
And we're just looking forward to having an open dialogue to learn more about what you do and how we also can be a part of your story and how we can make an impact, because we do care about the youth. It's the one thing we do share in common. And so welcome to this little discussion.
Yes, I'm excited.
Thank you for coming all the way down here to share your story.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd start out with just asking you a few questions so that everyone can kind of get to know you a little more.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
So first off, so how do you get to where you are today? And share with us a little about, because this isn't just a story of solutions of how to lift up youth. It's also your story as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. One of the things I want to convey is when we mention at-risk youth, that description has more to do with the social factors that young person has to endure, more than it has to do with who that young person is.
I see.
Sometimes when we say at-risk youth, we frame it in a way like it's something describing that child, but it's really describing the environment. The higher the risk factors go up, the more at risk that person is.
Right.
We're all at risk depending on our circumstances, right?
Right.
So with that being said, what that motivated me to do when I started looking at things from that lens, I started to want to just impact the young people a lot more, because of course, with my own personal experience and then working with the young people I work with, it's not their fault.
Right.
It's their responsibility, but it's not their fault.
Right.
And that's how I approach this work.
Yeah. Maybe you can share a little bit about organized trauma culture.
Yeah.
And that was a new term for me. I didn't know what that was until I read your book.
Yeah.
And that was pretty profound. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think you have a unique personal story of what it means to grow up in a culture where there's trauma.
Yeah, yeah. So what that's about, trauma organized culture, is really just expressing the reality that a lot of the cultural norms that many of the communities, gang and drug impacted communities, live under, are really trauma responses.
Right.
And with that being said, a lot of the experiences that many of us had are really traumatic, but we didn't know it was traumatic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see.
So what trauma is, just to give us some context, trauma is the body or the person's response to an experience that is so overwhelming that the brain can't healthily process it.
Right.
So it leads to all these maladaptive responses.
Yeah.
That over time it starts to be like just normal responses from a person or a character response.
Right.
But really it's a response to trauma.
Yeah. Right.
And when we talk about trauma organized culture, if you're dealing with a whole community of people who are dealing with traumatic experiences, and are responding with traumatic, with trauma responses, it starts to solidify into the culture, and that starts to be the norm, and it starts to be, this is how we do things.
Okay.
Right?
So I feel like I was a little traumatized when I read some of the stories in your book.
Wow.
because I didn't grow up in that culture.
Yeah.
Or I didn't grow up in a traumatized culture. I had, I think, a pretty normal upbringing. Maybe to some of the people listening, normal would be considered. I grew up in suburbia.
Yeah.
I had a father who was a teacher and mother who stayed at home. There were 5 kids, and life was pretty normal from what I understood it to be.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think for me, when I read some of the stories, I thought, wow, that sounds pretty traumatic.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you could you share with us a little bit about kind of maybe a little more specific of when you say trauma? Give me an example. Like, you saw trauma because you grew up in a trauma culture. So what is that? There's such a contrast. So
the interesting thing with that, like, let me give you an example. And another reason why I wrote this book is because, technically, I was a good kid, so to speak, quote unquote good kid. My mom raised me with strong morals and values, and
Yeah.
raised me with strong ambitions to pursue and things of that nature.
Right.
But talking about the risk factors,
Yeah.
if I'm surrounded by gang and drug culture,
Right.
it's going to have effect on me.
Yeah.
Not to mention that I grew up during the crack epidemic.
Yeah.
And because, it came and went, it's easy
Yeah.
to be like, oh, that was back in the day.
Right.
But I wanted to really highlight the ripple effects and how it affected our psyche.
Yeah.
So
Right.
one of the key things that I talk about when we're talking about how the crack epidemic affected my peer group and our generation
Yeah.
is we have to look at the crack business.
Yeah.
Okay? And I know it kind of gets weird. Like, why would you
Right.
want to look at that?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is the crack business was a child's business.
Yeah.
Okay? Very, very interesting. That it was kids who were selling the drugs.
And sorry to interrupt you,
Mhm.
but is that because it was easy for kids to get into drugs, or is that because they were exploited by drug dealers, or is it gang? That's what you did if you were in a gang. You dealt drugs.
It was so layered. It was a little bit of all of that.
Okay.
So for one, it was extremely easy
Yeah.
for kids to get access to this substance.
Right.
Right? I mean, extremely easy. It was just like almost going to the store. You could just
Yeah.
buy it.
Yeah.
Which leads to why was it so easy? Because like you just said, older drug dealers will exploit the kids.
Yeah.
You can sell this,
Right.
you're not gonna get as much
So they
time.
would kind of supply them with their first amount and sell it, and then they would make a little bit of money,
Right.
double down, and I think you said they would double down and take that money,
That's
roll
right.
it over to more supply, and next thing you know, within a week, they got a career.
It's like magic beans, right?
Yeah.
And then the other part of that is the adults were the ones who were using it.
Wow.
Okay? So if the kids are supplying it
Yeah.
and the adults are the users,
Right.
it flips the generational rankings upside down. So
Right.
now it's inverted.
Yeah.
Now the kids have a false sense of power
Yeah.
and the adults are the weak ones.
Wow.
Change the whole culture.
Right.
So what do you think that does to a child's psyche?
Yeah.
He's 13, 14 years old, has this man who was once respected in the community now begging him for this substance.
Yeah.
And this kid is making more money than his teachers, making more money than his parents.
Yeah.
And it's being reinforced in the entertainment because this is also, like we said, it's a perfect storm where this is also the rise of the quote-unquote gangster rap culture or music,
Yeah.
where billions of dollars is being pumped into this one specific genre.
Right.
And for the record, I mean, I loved it, so it's not like I'm here
Yeah.
to bash it,
Right.
but it was so one-dimensional at that time where that's all we were getting.
Yeah.
So that's being reinforced, right?
Right.
And it starts to just change the culture
Yeah.
and the fabric of the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
So rap music created a culture that was confounded with drug use.
Well, I wouldn't say it created it. What happened was rap music was really like we call a natural resource of the
Yeah.
oppressed.
Okay.
So rap music at one time really was there to empower the community.
Yeah.
But it started to, get handed off into a lot of, being transparent, being real, a lot of
Yeah.
corporations
Yeah.
where it's like, we could make more money off this.
Yeah.
So this one message, this one character, just one genre just kept being flooded into
Yeah.
our ears.
Right.
So it didn't create these problems or these
Right.
challenges, but what it did is reinforced a lot
Reinforce
of them.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so the values of it maybe
Yeah.
shifted somehow,
Shifted.
and so they started feeding the beast.
There it is.
Here you go. Let's because you listen to all that music, and I listened to a little bit of rap too growing up.
Yeah.
And I liked rap music.
Yeah.
But I wasn't say that was the only genre I listened to.
Right.
But it sounds like you were embedded in the rap music, rap culture.
That's it. Right.
Yeah.
So without that balance,
Yeah.
and without the balance of not having something other,
Yeah.
being reinforced,
Right.
it starts to have a deeper impact.
Yeah.
Right. Not to mention, here's another interesting thing. When we start talking about many of the people that grew up in my communities,
Mm-hmm.
we can identify.
Yeah.
Because they're telling our stories.
Right.
They look like us. They come
Yeah.
from where we come from.
Right.
So they're telling our stories, and then they're telling unfortunately, a false conclusion.
Yeah.
And that's where it got bad.
And that false conclusion being
everything is gonna be good. I could
look at me. I'm a successful entertainer.
Yeah, I can live a life of crime. I can disrespect who I want to. I could do all of this, and I will still win.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
As where previously, if you look at some of the older rappers, they would talk about the streets, the same things.
Yeah.
But they will give you the real ending.
Right.
You know, they'll let you know, yeah, you can live this, but guess what? There's going to be some consequences, repercussions.
Yeah.
When I got a little older, more in my teen years, those repercussions were removed from the music.
Right.
It was like this is the way to win.
Yeah.
Which was a false hope.
Yeah. So when you say false hope, it sounds like the idea of success.
Yeah.
What is the idea of success in a trauma culture? How would you?
That's a great question. So it was reinforcing outward success.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, outward. You know, who can be the flashiest? Who has the most jewelry? Who has the just constant, just constant flash.
Yeah.
Versus really having some rooted wealth.
Yeah.
You know, which is a whole nother conversation. Right. But it focused more on the materialism of success.
Right.
Not the longevity of success, you know.
And getting that through being affiliated with a drug?
It could be through drugs, things of that nature. See, now when we talk about the trauma culture, organized culture, here's another big piece of that.
Yeah.
Many of us had a short life expectancy.
Yeah.
We didn't expect to live past 18, 21, definitely 25.
Wow.
So when we look at it, it's like, why would this person spend all his money right now? No, I'm not even thinking about the future because I don't expect to live that long.
Wow.
So let me enjoy now.
It's a fast life, but a good life.
Yes.
From the narrative.
Yes.
Wow, this is what I got to do to live well and live fast. And if it ends tomorrow, hey, it was
a great ride.
Yeah, it was a good ride.
Live fast, die young.
But it sounds like, obviously some live longer than that. And in your book, you shared some story about kids having their life taken from them.
Yes.
Had a very short life. Some of them your friends.
Yes.
Because you grew up in a tough neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Maybe not so tough to you.
Right.
It was,
I didn't see it to be that good.
That was kind of normal. So it's raised a lot of question, and thanks for sharing. Because I think part of this is trying to build a bridge of understanding of what it's like to grow up in that, in a culture that there's trauma. I want to touch on something that you brought up in the book, and that is restorative justice. And you told the story of how two different girls, Jessica and Jackie, deal with restorative justice, and that was a new term for me. And so, if you could share for our listeners that story, but then what is restorative justice, and how does that fit in the context of
restorative justice is an approach to basically to different violations in the community, where we bring the situation before the community, so to speak, and we rectify how we may have hurt you. How do I restore? How do I repair the loss that I have caused you?
Right.
So if I have assaulted you or something, we're going to sit down amongst the community and talk about it and talk about how I have affected you, so to speak, right? And restore the relationship.
Yep.
But the challenge is when there's really a lot of fragmented relationships, it's very hard to restore anything because the relationship is not there in the first place.
Right.
So when we talk about Jessica and Jackie, using those as examples, the story is, let's just say Jessica comes from what we call Community A. Mm-hmm. Community A is what you described before. We talked about like suburban, very supportive, also good relationship with law enforcement, homeowners, which represents stability and things of that nature. I could go on and on. That's Community A.
Okay.
Community,
so that resonates with me because I grew up in that. I can say, I grew up in a community like that.
Yeah. So what will happen in that is in Community A, the value system tends to be, quote unquote, stay out of trouble, so to speak. Get you a good education because you're thinking about your future. Yeah. You don't want to mess up, your future, so to speak. Yeah. So you make all your decisions based on that.
Right.
So with that being said, let's say Jessica is growing up in Community A and goes to school, and another student hits her in the face in front of everybody. generally, and I say generally because everybody's not going to handle it this way, but generally, Jessica, if she gets hit in the face, let's say she's 10 years old, she's going to go tell a teacher or some authority.
Right.
Why is she going to tell? Because she trusts authority. Some people will say, no, because she's a tattletale. No, not because she's a tattletale. She trusts authority. She trusts that authority is going to move on her behalf and, you know, and work it out.
And defend her.
Defend her.
And make it right.
That's it. The authority is going to make it right.
Yep.
I don't, you know, if I'm Jessica, I don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
I don't want to fight and all this stuff and get in trouble and embarrass my family and all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to handle it that way.
Yep.
Right? Community B. Not so supportive, you know. Let's just say, you know, maybe gang and drug impacted. It doesn't have the same stability, you know, a lot of moving around and things of that nature. And I'm sure you can get the gist of it. Not in favor of
very different from Jessica's.
Very different, right? And this is where Jackie lives, right? If she gets struck in the face at school, let's say she's 10 years old in front of everybody, generally she's definitely not going to tell.
Yeah.
She's going to fight back.
Yep.
Not because she's inherently violent.
Yeah.
But because her value system is about survival first. Reputation first.
Wow.
Secondly, Jackie grew up in a culture where there's no trust with authority. I don't trust authority is going to handle it. It's going to move in my benefit. So I'm going to take it into my own hands.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And if I don't, guess what's going to happen? The community around me is going to prey on me.
Yeah. So see her as weak.
As weak.
You know, you're not going to do anything about it.
That's right.
What's wrong with you?
Right.
So go.
She'll be dealing with that for the next 10 years. You remember back when you was 10 years old when that girl punched you in the face and you didn't, you know, she will be living with that forever, right?
Right.
Different culture. It's survival.
The fear of facing that and the lack of, you know, somebody on her behalf, you know, protecting her from that is not there or developed enough. So she, for her own reputation and for her own survival and strength, has to demonstrate her own justice.
Her own justice. And you hit it on the nose. Because she does not feel protected by her community. Yeah. So she has to take it into her own hands, right? It's me against the world.
Right.
As where using Jessica, she very well may fight. Because we're not going to say she wasn't. But she has the choice to handle it, you know, take matters in her own hands or to tell. And she will be supported both ways.
The point is she has a choice.
She has a choice.
Where Jackie doesn't feel like she has a choice.
She doesn't feel like she does.
So she has to go down this path. Which now you're using an example of someone just getting slapped.
Right.
Now I can imagine things in some neighborhoods are a lot more escalated than just slapping each other.
Absolutely. It gets way more intense,
especially when they're, you know, someone shot somebody or someone beat someone to death or something really, really bad.
Right.
And you can apply that kind of environment, things can escalate pretty bad pretty quick.
Very quick.
And you saw that growing up, right? I mean,
and that's the thing when we're talking about consequences. Like for instance, using the Jackie and Jessica, the consequence of like telling, for instance,
right,
is, you know, some ridicule.
Yep.
As you get older, the consequence of telling can literally be your life.
Right.
So if I don't understand this, and I'm here trying to work with this community, and I'm telling this child, why didn't you just tell? Yeah. You should have just told.
That's like saying, why don't you go shoot yourself?
Why don't you just throw yourself in front of a rail, you know, in front of a train and see what happens. Right. Like, you know, so that's where what I call social relevance is important.
Right.
You know, and I use the word social relevance versus cultural relevance. Yeah. Because generally when we hear culture, we automatically think ethnicity. Yeah. And this has very little to do with ethnicity. This has to do with social realities. Right. You have to understand the social reality of the communities you're seeking to serve. Yeah. Whether you come from it or not, still must take the time to understand the social realities.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really insightful.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
It's important, and that's pretty much the basis of a lot of my work. Yeah. Even when we talk about live above the hype and all of these, it's really working to make education socially relevant. Right. If we're working with a community that is dealing with all of these different challenges, and then you want me to sit in class for 6 to 8 hours, to talk about subjects that have really nothing to do with my immediate reality, right? I'm not going to be engaged.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to, educate them on the future, but we have to be able to educate our young people on some practical, immediate lessons to help them critically think and navigate through, like we said earlier, the risk factors that they have to endure.
Yeah. So I think what makes your story and your work compelling is that you connect with your the people you teach. So right now you used to be a teacher and you work directly with children, and then now or teens, I should say, kids and teens. And now you work with youth workers, whether it's a teacher of a high school or a teacher of middle school or primary school, as well as coaches, and but you have this credibility that is welcomed. Yeah. So someone like me coming in saying, "Hey, you should just tell the teacher next time they do that to you," or call the police, or tell your mom. Right. Hey, why don't you have a sit down with their parents? That for me, I'm imputing sort of my community A on community B, and that's not going to work. Right. Because it's easy for me to sit back here and say, yeah, you should do that, or you should do this, and why don't they do this? And that's just really what I've learned is just my lack of sort of understanding of what it's like.
But it's powerful that you even acknowledge that, because that's what it takes. It takes a certain empathy and humility to work with different communities that we may not come from. Right. And that's where that social relevancy comes in, right? Because some of these principles, let's just use community A and community B. There's many values that can be taught to community B or vice versa, depending on what the value is. Right. But it has to be taught in a way where there's empathy. Yeah. Right. Can't be taught in a way where there's judgment and condemnation. Yeah. You should. So, for instance, using Jackie, she gets smacked in the face. Community B gets smacked in the face, and she fights. Right. If I'm socially relevant, I understand why she fought. Right. It doesn't mean that I excuse that she fought and say, "Oh, I understand where you come from. This community, it's okay." No, it's not okay. Yeah. But I'm going to approach it different. Right. And I'm gonna give you a quick example. Yeah. If I'm the authority, I'm not going to immediately start reprimanding Jackie, telling her what she did wrong. Right. My first question is, "Are you okay?" Yeah. We can deal with the behavior and all that. She needs to know that there is somebody who cares. Yeah. Because that's one of the reasons why she fought in the first place, because she feels she has to defend herself. There is nobody who cares. Right. So I need to let her know I'm here for you. Right. We can deal with your misbehavior afterwards. Yeah. But let's establish that care first. Right. Because talking about trauma again, studies have shown there is no more effective remedy to helping somebody heal from trauma than establishing safe relationships. Yeah. Yeah. Very important.
Yeah. So with regard to trauma, I mean, when I think of trauma, I think of traumatic stress syndrome, or what we call post-traumatic stress syndrome. Yeah, yeah. And I think about a soldier that goes to battle and has seen some stuff that has impacted him mentally, but doesn't realize it until he comes home from the battlefield and realizes, wow, I don't know why this is triggering something in me, and it's paralyzing me to where it now is creating a dysfunction in my life. But what you're talking about is living in a community where there's constant trauma. Yes. So can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. So that's where most people have their context when it comes to trauma, the post-traumatic stress disorder that our veterans, many of our veterans have experienced. Yeah. Now, the difference with what we're talking about with the communities that we're serving is, for a lot of our young people, the trauma is not post. Right. They're still in it. Yeah. And much respect to our veterans, as I say this. Yeah. But like, our veterans generally know when they're on the battlefield, this is not home. Yeah. I'm coming home one day, hopefully. Right. Right. As where a lot of our young people, this is home. Yeah. Where do I go? Right. They're this is it. Yeah. So we start to create these barriers and things to survive, these maladaptive coping mechanisms that somebody may look at and turn their nose up if they don't understand. Right. And I'll give you another example. If I've been in situations where there's a lot of threat, and I'll make it real easy. Let's just say I'm walking down the street, and this is fiction. I'm walking down the street, and a crocodile jumps out. Right. I'm going to be on one, right? You know what I'm saying? Let's say I heard a chain first, a little chain rattle, and then a crocodile jumps out.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna be terrified. It's going to my heart rate, everything. I'm going nuts.
Yeah.
Every time I hear that chain or something that sounds like that chain,
right?
Guess what? I'm gonna react the same way because my brain has remembered. Okay, chain rattle, crocodile.
Yeah.
So if I hear anything that resembles the sound of that chain, I'm gonna respond as if there's a crocodile.
Right.
So when you look at what's going on in our communities, it's the same thing. You may see somebody and say, "Why would you respond that way just because the guy looked at you funny?"
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. 10 years ago, there's a guy who looked at me funny, and then there was a threat afterwards.
Right.
So now every time I see that look, I respond that way.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Until I can work through this and start to understand that every time the chain rattles, there doesn't mean it's going to be a crocodile.
Right.
If I don't have an opportunity to process that, I'm going to respond as there's a crocodile every time.
Right.
And that can come through all, using that as an example.
Right.
There's a lot of chain rattles that we see.
That are happening.
Yeah.
Today, it seems like even more so.
Right.
For you, from what it sounds like, it's always been there because you've been doing this work for many years. I mentioned 6 years ago, but this is something that you've been doing, dedicating your life to.
I'm about 18 years in now.
So you know those chains, and I'm hearing it for the first time. Especially in light of some of the things that are happening today in our communities.
Yeah,
it's we all want to figure out a way to make our communities better, and that's where you and I have some common interests.
Absolutely.
That we believe in the youth, and the youth is the future. And how can we leave this a better place by helping the youth own their tomorrow?
Yeah.
And that's why I love the work you're doing. So thanks for sharing that. But I want to get a little personal here a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things that so you grew up in a culture where there was a lot of trauma, there was a lot of chains, so you sort of knew your way around, and you survived. You're here, and we're having this conversation. But you kind of come full circle. You went to college, and now you're out. You taught, and now you're doing Live Above the Hype as your service. But I want to quote something your mom said, which I think is really profound, because this is kind of a mantra of when I think of you and your life and your mom, it's who you are, and it's a quote that says, "A winner never quits, and a quitter never wins." A winner never quits, and a quitter never wins.
That's it.
And that was your mom. And what I want to go have you share a little bit more is, how did you move from a trauma culture where it seems like most of the odds were really against you, but here you are. You did finish college, right? You went to a good college,
San Diego State.
San Diego State, yeah. For any Aztecs out there,
absolutely.
So you went to college, but that wasn't an easy journey for you.
No.
And you mentioned that in your book that your mom was really adamant and strong about you going to college, no matter what. K-Rahn, you're going to go to college.
That's right.
Right. So tell us about your journey of being a high schooler and going to college. You mentioned meeting with a counselor, 2 of them.
Yes.
And I want you to share that story because I think that's really, really profound. For me, when I read it, I go, wow, that's pretty profound.
Okay, yeah. So like you said, my mom always instilled in me, you're going to college. You're going to college. To the point where it was just a known fact in my head. Yep. Now, my work ethic did not align with what I knew to be true, which is I'm going to college. Yeah. So, to be totally transparent, no, I wasn't engaged in class. Yeah. I wasn't there a lot of times. But with that being said, I somehow still knew how to make sure I get certain things done. Yeah. Okay. And to your point about the counselors, I'll tell you this story. My mom had said, okay, you're in 11th grade, it's time for you to talk to your school counselor. So I go talk to my college counselor. I won't say her name. I remember her name, but I won't say it, right? And being very, very intentional about my description for those who think that you have to look a certain way, come from a certain background or something. Let me share this with you. My college counselor, she had a little afro, Africa earrings, beads, dashiki, the whole thing. So me being 15 at the time, I'm like, yes, You know, being totally real with you. She's going to understand me.
Right.
She's going to have my back. All of that.
Yeah.
I go in there and not being honest again. I'm walking in the office. My eyes are bloodshot red. You know,
we won't say why.
Yeah, but we can read between the lines. You know, I'm giving off a certain aroma from the earlier morning from the activities, right?
Right.
So, and I have to describe that because these are a lot of our young people.
Yeah.
Right, and these are a lot of things that we can judge them right off top. So that's who comes into her office.
Yep.
She looks at my transcripts. She never looks up at me. She looks directly at my transcripts while I'm sitting in front of her, and she says, "You can't go to college." Dead silence afterwards. Awkward silence. No explanation, no encouragement. You can't go to college. So at that point, I'm feeling defeated because I already don't really think I can go to college, right?
In your head, your mom's saying, you're going to college.
Right. My mom is instilling in me, but she's telling me something different.
Right.
Now, again, I gave you that description because, you know, as a young African-American boy, looking at this woman who's also African-American and looks a certain way, I'm thinking, she's definitely going to have my back.
Right.
And it didn't work out that way. Okay? Right. So I go home. I tell my mom what happened. My mom is livid. She's upset. Like, you know, you're going back. You go talk to another counselor. The whole thing.
Yeah.
So I go to another counselor. This counselor, total opposite. You know, she's older, white. What else? I can't even think of what else. But just total opposite of what I'm looking for.
But you didn't change. You're still that guy coming in with...
I come in even more. You know, my eyes is even redder this time. You know what I'm saying? I got something to prove now. Right?
You're thinking this ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, isn't that right?
Before.
I done heard this.
Right.
I'm filling up her room, her office with my aroma, all of that. and I use those descriptions for a reason.
Yeah.
Because when you see this guy come in, it's very easy to judge him.
Yeah.
Or her.
Right.
They don't want anything out of life. They don't, you know, it's very easy to judge that person. Write me off immediately.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so specific about describing that.
Right.
Here I am coming to talk about college like that.
Right.
Right? So what she does is she looks at my transcripts. And just if I hadn't said it, just to let you know, they weren't good if you haven't figured it out by now. They were not good. Right? She looks at my transcripts. And she puts them down and she looks at me and says, So kiddo, what college do you want to go to? Right? Mind you, when she said, well, kiddo, that may sound like something like nothing to you.
Yeah.
To me, that was already melted to ice. Because guess what? I've never been called kiddo before.
Yeah.
You know, as a young black male, bloodshot eyes, dressed the way I'm dressed, I've always been, you know, at least from the way I've viewed it, been treated as a threat.
Yeah.
Nobody saw me as a kid. They see me as he's a threat. That's a menace.
Right.
She saw past all of that.
Yep.
So, kiddo, where do you want to go? She asked me where do I want to go versus telling me where I can and can't go.
Right.
So what I do is, again, at this time, this is when I'm watching college football. I'm naming all of the colleges that I see on TV. So I'm like Notre Dame, you know, Florida State, Michigan State. These are all the places that I'm looking for, right? UCLA, I think I said USC.
Right.
And
you said USC and UCLA in the same sentence?
In the same, because I don't know the difference. I found out later that they don't go together, right? Right. So I say this, and then she says, well, let's look at the requirements.
Yeah.
Now, this is before internet. So she had to literally pull out a catalog and go and look at these requirements.
Yep.
Now, I go through all of that to say, she knew I didn't qualify for Notre Dame.
Right.
She knew that.
Right.
But she was basically humoring me and just walking me through the process versus writing me off.
Yep.
So we go through all this process, and basically she says, have you ever thought of a state school?
Yeah.
And I don't know what a state school is. Right. Like I said, I said Michigan State because I see it on TV, but I don't know what a state school is.
But you heard college, state, college, and...
Right. So I'm like...
sounds good, college.
Cool, let's do it.
Yeah.
So she explained what a state school is, and then we go through the requirements for that.
Yep.
I still don't qualify for any of that.
Right.
So what she says is, K-Rahn, right now you don't qualify for any of these colleges.
Yep.
But here's the key. But if you want to go to these colleges, here's what you must do.
Yeah.
And we walked together. She gave me a blueprint of what I need to do. And she said, I'm here to help you. I'll help you the whole way through.
Wow.
But you have to do your part.
Yeah.
You can't do it for you. You have to do your part.
Yeah.
So I leave that office with the same mask, metaphorically, the same mask that I had on before. But inside, something changed.
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to college. I can do this. And I had a whole newfound hope.
To go tell your mom.
Yeah, Mom, I'm going. Yeah. Right? And I say that to say, as we've been talking about trauma and things of this nature, Miss Ramsey was one of the people, and I don't know if I said her name earlier, but her name is Miss Ramsey.
Yep.
She was a person who used trauma informed approaches.
Yeah.
Before there was ever a framework or language to call it trauma informed.
She modeled it for you, which has been a big part of your work.
Absolutely. Right. Intuitively she did that. And there's a lot of people who's working with these communities who intuitively are already doing that, right? Yeah. She didn't look like me. She didn't come from where I come from, but she cut through all of the barriers and she connected with me and showed me that she cared about me.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. Right. That's all I needed, right?
And she empowered you and showed you how you can do this, but you're going to have to take some responsibility and do the hard work. And she showed you the way.
Yes. Yeah. She held me accountable.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's another thing when we're talking about working with our young people.
Yeah.
We don't want to see when I talk about these, I don't want this to be like, oh, they're going through so much, so let's just baby them. No.
Right.
They still need to be held accountable.
Right.
Right? It just may need some accommodations to help them along the way.
So you still had to, essentially I think you had to go retake some classes.
I had to take summer school, Saturday school. I took some got an ROP program. Regional Occupational Program.
Right. And this all to get your GPA
just to get it up. That's right. I got 2 A's from that ROP. Bumped me up a lot. Right. Yeah.
Thank goodness for ROP.
Right? Yeah. That's why I had to shout about because that really did help me. Right.
But you also had to prepare for the college exam, right?
Yeah.
The SAT test.
Well, I wouldn't say that I prepared, but I did take it.
Yeah.
And I by the grace of God,
you got to score high enough.
I did well. Yeah, I did well on that test. Right.
So this is another story, but I'm sure it must have been cultural. So you get into college, you get into San Diego State, you attend college there, and you finish.
Yeah.
And you go into education.
Yes.
Because you now realize, wow, education is really fun. Right?
Yeah. The interesting thing, the reason why I got into education is because when I got to college, I realized through my whole public school experience, I never had one black male teacher.
Yeah.
Wow. Not one male teacher of color, period.
Yeah. Wow.
was very important to me.
Right.
Because I started to learn cultural history, and I'm like, wow, I never learned this in school.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go back and be an example.
Wow.
For my community.
Right.
Right. Just again to model something.
Yep.
To model like, yes, you can be an educator.
Yeah. Right.
Because there's usually a profile of who we think educators look like or are. Yep. It's like, no, I'm breaking all those molds.
Yeah.
And then I loved it. Once I started teaching, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it.
And I think it sounds like through that you wanted to have a greater impact.
Yeah.
With the youth, and so you got into the work you're doing now. Now you're impacting other teachers.
Yes.
And educating them on this, how to coach and mentor kids.
Yeah.
To seek beyond a life of, the crack generation, rap culture. At least that's how the time was for you.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about in your book about kids aspiring to be something, it seemed like it was either be a drug dealer, live a fast, good life, short life. So that's the life of crime.
Yeah.
Or become an entertainer, like a rap star or somewhere, and you can live that life too.
Right.
Or maybe a sports figure. A lot of sports figures or live a great life. So either an athlete, an entertainer, or a drug dealer. And if you're neither one of those, then what are you? But in none of those, it seems like college was really modeled to you until Mrs. Ramsey came in and said, hey, you could go to college, K-Rahn, but this is what you
have to do. Yeah. So here's the thing about that. Because my mom had instilled that college in me, that's what made me even really pursue it, right?
Right.
And the point you bring up is so important about modeling.
Yeah.
A lot of our young people need to see success stories that are attached to the paths that we want them to go down.
Right.
If I want these young people to go to college, guess what I need to do? I need to show them some examples of successful people who went to college.
Like, what's the benefit of that? Why should I, repeat all my classes, study for SAT like you did?
Yeah.
So I can go to college to do
what? Right? To do what? So that's where that comes in. Now, here's the interesting thing when we talk about like the work that I do with Live Above the Hype and the trainings and all of that. There is something that's so important. No one operates beyond the boundaries of their own self-image.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
I have to tap into my students' self-image. I have to tap into my community self-image. Whoever I'm working with, I have to tap into their self-image.
Yeah.
The way they see themselves.
Right.
And based on that is how you motivate them. That goes for any community, any ethnicity, any socioeconomic.
Yeah.
It has to do with self-image.
Right.
And when a person's self-image is positive, guess what? They make positive decisions.
They make positive decisions.
When their self-image is negative or lower, guess what? They'll make lower decisions.
Right.
We will literally self-sabotage. And I'll give you an example. When we're talking about the communities, that's what's happened.
Yeah.
I talked to you about like how I didn't study for the SAT and I didn't really go to class.
Yeah.
The reason I bring that up is because that lets me know that I was blessed with a pretty strong head on my shoulders.
Yeah. Right.
But my self-image caused me to constantly self-sabotage.
Right.
Because what's been reinforced. Now that I have a different self-image, you see different stuff coming out of me, right? The brilliance is coming out.
Right.
And I say that because many of the young people that we work with, they have so much untapped brilliance in them.
Yeah.
But the self-image has been, stifled, so to speak. So very important.
Right. So I want to touch on something a little personal again, and that is you talk about modeling, and in your book you mentioned that a lot of your friends didn't have their fathers around. In fact, you never met their fathers, and even for you were raised by a single mom.
Yeah.
I think the only person you said you in your youth that had a father was a cousin.
Yeah.
That you saw the father around, and if you could share with us the impact of that on your life, because I think people are wondering, what's the impact of that? And if you don't have a father model, then where do you go?
Right. So the interesting thing about that, and I thank you for bringing that up. I have children now, so looking back, once I had this light bulb moment where I was like, wait a minute, because I started trying to grab lessons on this fatherhood thing, because it's pretty tough, right?
Right. Oh yeah.
It's tough.
Well, you didn't have a model father, it sounds like, so you are now a father yourself.
Yeah. So now I'm trying to figure out where do I get my my examples from.
Yeah.
And what I started to think about, I was thinking, as a child, none of my peer group that my immediate peer group that I grew up with, none of us have fathers in the home.
Yeah.
Except for like you just shared, my friend's cousin.
Yeah.
Had one in the home. Now in the church there was people that have fathers in the home and things of that nature. But in my immediate peer group were none of us.
Right.
So as I reflected on that, looking back, that made it clear why we look to other people, whether it be a rapper or the quote unquote big homie in the neighborhood. We look to them for this paternal guidance.
Right.
How does he say I should treat this young lady?
Yeah, right.
What does he say manhood is about?
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of that stuff was counterproductive principles.
Yeah.
That we took as true.
Right.
We thought this is the way of life until you get older and be like, wait a minute, this not right.
Yeah.
So it had a profound effect on us.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. I wanted to, if I could, read a section out of your book.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think it was really impactful for me. And it's on, I think it's page 53, where you talk about imagine.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine really any of those things when I read it, and the contrast of what you shared and maybe how I was brought up is so different. And I think that's not uncommon today, because we all come from different parts and different backgrounds. So I just wanted to share this, and if you guys want to know more, obviously you can buy the book on Amazon and read it. It's a great read, and I think it gives you some really good perspective and understanding of not just K-Rahn, but the work he does, which I think is incredible. But so listen to this. This is actually about a full page, but I'll read a section of it, and then I'll read as best I could, and then you can kind of maybe close your eyes.
Absolutely.
I'm not a storyteller, but I'll do my best. In heavily gang and drug impacted communities, the brain and the body work no differently. Imagine how devastating it can be to witness the rapid social, financial, moral, and physical deterioration of a loved one who's become addicted to drugs. Imagine that same drug addict loved one buying drugs from one of your drug-selling loved ones. Imagine the pain of suddenly losing a loved one who was murdered by someone you know among your peers, or even by another loved one. Imagine knowing about the murder and not being able to say anything about it, because in your community that would be frowned upon as snitching, which has its own consequences. Then, since telling authorities or your peers is not an option, but you still want to do something about it, imagine taking matters into your own hands. Imagine you're now the one causing other people the same pain you once felt. Imagine the other people then going through the same process and cycle that you just went through. Then imagine not trusting law enforcement because, although they are said to protect and serve you, you know firsthand that many of them instead have and will continue to violate, harass, and brutalize you or your peers. Imagine now losing a close friend to a long time incarceration because police caught him with a small amount of an unlawful substance. Imagine considering that this same unlawful substance is coming into your neighborhood from out of the country. Imagine questioning how this unlawful substance is getting into your country so frequently in such large amounts and then make it into your neighborhood. Imagine considering that very few people ever get arrested for bringing huge amounts of this unlawful substance in, while so many people in our community continue to get arrested for possessing such small amounts of it once it's here. Imagine your government declaring a war on drugs, which leads to a tremendous increase in incarceration rate, and your fellow community residents, whom the war on drugs is supposed to protect, but with no decrease in the presence of drugs in your community, and no improvement in the community safety. Imagine the same war on drugs that is supposed to be placed to protect you, ironically, instead feels like a war on you and the people who look like you. Imagine popular music being made about your painful reality, distributed to the entire world to sing along and dance to. Imagine you and the entire world chanting lyrics to celebrate the death and destruction of a community. Imagine experience all of this as a child. Wow, that's pretty deep.
Yeah.
That's pretty deep.
Yeah, and that's a common reality. Yeah.
So this kind of this war on drugs. I mean, you talk about the crack generation. You're from that crack generation, but it seems like the drug issue is still prevalent.
Yeah.
Especially what we now call the opioid crisis.
Yeah. So the thing about that, drugs have been going on in America for decades and decades.
Right.
And like right now, as you mentioned, there's the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is just that terminology, the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
Lets us know it's a crisis.
Right.
So the way it's being handled is it's being handled as it's a crisis that these people need help.
Right.
Versus the crack epidemic it's like an epidemic, this plague, where it was being handled where these people need to be criminalized.
Yeah.
These people need to be locked up.
Right.
During this time, you will have the drug user and the drug seller sitting in the same jail cell.
Yeah.
It wasn't no rehabilitation or any of that. You both go to jail.
Right.
Which it has its own set of consequences, right?
Right.
Where now I'm in jail or whatever it may be, and that causes a whole nother set of problems. So I don't know if it's because our country recognize how wrong it was in handling the crack epidemic, that is handling the opiate crisis differently, or maybe it's because it's affecting the different population. There's all different reasons of why we can say it's being handled different, but it's definitely being handled differently.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a big issue and big challenge.
Yes.
We were talking earlier about this idea of this treating the sick, the injured, and I forget the other one, but I think that was pretty. Could you share with us a little bit about that example?
And I got this. It's called the injury model from Sandra Bloom. Yeah. And basically, what she talks about is there's different ways that we can view the community when we're talking about people who are in trauma culture, so to speak. Some people are on one side of the spectrum where they look at the communities, like gang and drug impacted communities, and see them as bad. If you see somebody as bad, You just want them punished. You want them out the way. Get this bad apple out the way. Get those,
put them in jail.
Put them in jail. Lock them up. Just get them out of my face because they're
bad for the community.
Right.
They're the cancer. Cut them out.
Cut them out.
Right.
Right. That
seems logical.
Yeah.
Right, for most people.
If they're bad, that's how I view them.
Right.
Then you have the other side of the spectrum where we see the community as we may see them as sick.
Yeah.
Now, if we see them as sick, we want to pull accountability from them.
Yeah.
Give them what they need.
Right.
Doctor them up. It's just like if you was sick at my home, I'm gonna make your chicken noodle soup. I'm gonna feed you. I'm gonna go get your orange juice. I'm just gonna give you what you need. In my perspective, both are detrimental to the community because these are two extremes.
Right.
There's something called the injury model where I see the community as injured.
Yeah.
Where, yes, there are some challenges.
Right.
So because of that, there needs to be some accommodations.
Yeah.
Because you are injured.
Yeah.
But I still need to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
So if we're using that same couch example, if your leg is broke, I'm going to help you and get your orange juice this time.
Yeah.
But I'm going to need you to put some pressure on that leg. Because if you don't ever put pressure on that leg, it's never going to heal.
You're never going to walk again.
You're never going to walk.
Like that physical therapist who, it's so painful when I go to the therapist.
That's right.
I thought she's helping me, but it's hurting me.
Yeah, she's pulling you.
It's supposed to be good for me.
That's right. That's exactly, that's what they call tough love, right?
Right.
So if we go too far extreme and see everybody is bad, it's a problem. If we go too far extreme and see everybody is sick, it's a problem. We have to find that healthy balance. I'm going to accommodate you and give you what you need, but you still got to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Which is why I said earlier when I said with our kids, I said it may not be their fault, but it's still their responsibility.
Yeah.
So because it's not their fault, we're going to accommodate because you didn't ask for all these risk factors.
Right.
But it's your responsibility. You still have a part to play in your own success.
So just like the therapists and the medical professionals working with trying to help an injured person, we can help and be a part of the healing of that.
Yes.
Not just here you're sick, here's some chicken noodles.
Right.
Or you're bad, let's get you out of here. So on that note, I mean, with all of that's happening today, it seems like every time I turn on the news, there's something difficult to watch. The social unrest and all the things that are happening. How can we be a part of the solution and not add to the problems of some of the social unrest we're experiencing? Now, this is something that you've been doing all along. So that's why I like having you here and talking to you about it, because I really view you as an expert in this area of work.
Thank you.
It's not something that just happened this year. This is something you've been dedicating your life to.
Absolutely.
About helping youth and really trying to build a better future for all of us in all our communities.
Absolutely.
So, but how does someone like me, how does some of our listeners, how do they, what can they do? I mean, how do they play a part?
First thing I would say is what we're doing right now, this is a part of the solution.
Okay.
Having these conversations. Taking the time to really hear from the communities that we want to serve, right? Versus just judging and condemning, know. So that's the first thing.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we're going to always agree on everything. It's not about us always seeing the same way.
Yeah.
But we need to hear each other,
right.
And like you just said, ask, right? We want to ask, what do you need?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you need? And with that being said, what I always share with people is there's going to always be multiple fronts to fight. This world has trillions of problems.
Yeah.
I would say, first of all, let's lock into what our lane is.
Yeah.
What do we want to help with?
Right.
What cause do we want to get behind?
Yeah.
And then once we identify what cause we want to get behind, we start to identify what position do we play.
Yeah.
Like me, I work with youth, right?
Yep.
So that's my lane.
Yeah.
Right now, we're talking about the social climate. There's a lot of issues, a lot of issues coming up to the surface. And there's been plenty of calls I've gotten.
Yeah.
K-Rahn, you should come over here and do this. You should come over here and do this. All of them are pressing issues.
Right.
But like we said, a winner never quits, a quitter never wins.
Yeah.
I have to stay on my path.
Right.
I can support from a distance,
yeah,
but I have to stay on my path and play my position.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about how else do we help, identifying what your position is.
Right.
Your position may or may not be on the front line.
Right.
You may work directly with youth.
Yeah.
You may not.
Right.
But if you choose to, then do that. If you don't, find somebody who does.
Yeah.
and support that person,
right?
Support that organization, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we deal with it. We sit there and we find our positions, because everybody on the football field can't be the quarterback. Everybody can't be the running back.
Yeah.
Some people,
that's a bummer,
right?
I want the ball.
Right, I want the ball, but maybe my position is to block,
right?
Because guess what? Without a blocker, the person with the ball would never get to that end zone.
Right.
So we all need each other. Connect with the organizers.
Yeah.
And things of that nature. And again, having these healthy dialogues are so important, because we don't know what we don't know.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
And I totally agree with that saying, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
After reading your book, I didn't know what I obviously didn't know. And I'm still learning, and definitely want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Right.
So thank you for sharing your story, your insight, and the work that you're doing. And we just want to continue to lift you up in that.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you taking the time to come here today to share with our audience, our listeners. And I guess they can look you up if they want to buy the book. They can buy that on Amazon.
Absolutely.
And, learn more about Live the Hype if you're a teacher, educator, and you deal with trauma, culture, youth at risk. It's a great curriculum to take kids through, to help improve them and get them on the right path.
Absolutely.
So thank you, K-Rahn, for coming here and sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for listening and taking the time to be with us.